I'm Elaine, the Ninja Life Coach, and today we're talking again with Amy Beth, and we're going to do part 2 of her story. Amy Beth has suffered through a horrible abusive situation with her husband, and she was kind enough and transparent enough to come on the channel today and share that with our audience. So, Amy Beth, thank you so much for the courage just to come forward.
Thank you for having me again.
Do you want to just briefly recap about what we talked about last time? Because you guys can jump right back on and watch part 1 if you want to, and I would highly recommend you do that before you watch this. But I know you may have had a couple of things you wanted to say there about that.
Yeah, so in our previous video, we mainly just talked about some of the red flags that I noticed early on in the relationship and leading up to being married. And I want to add that I wish that I and so many other women would just listen to their gut instinct, because I really think that will never ever lie to you. I think God gave us that gut instinct for a reason. And I wish, looking back and even just sitting here talking to you and reflecting back on the incident where I was taken to the gym and he got in his vehicle and sped ahead, and I just really saw that anger in him for the first time. And when we got back to his house, I was about to leave because I just told him, like, this just doesn't feel right, and I wish I have followed through with that decision just to get in my car and just leave. But of course, through like manipulation and his tactics, he got me to stay, so I stayed. But even to this day, sometimes I just beat myself over. Why didn't you leave then? You could have spared yourself all of this.
Right.
Because I think if I had have left, I would have had a second of peace, and I can kind of think through my thoughts of how wrong that situation was. Because who shows colors like that early on, especially?
That's a red flag.
Yeah.
Big red flag right there.
And it was very early on.
Yeah.
So.
We're going to go ahead and dive right on into what happened right after you were married.
Okay.
And one thing that you wrote down here was that you were not allowed to visit your family.
Mm-hmm. This was definitely a way for him and his family to control me.
Uh-huh.
I think he knew that if I got away for a little bit of time and had a little bit of time away from how he treated me, that I would start to recognize this isn't right. Away from this, I can be happy. Yeah. Away from this, I don't have to be in turmoil. I don't have to be screamed at. I don't have to be yelled at.
Why do you think, he kept you there, obviously for some degree of control?
Mm-hmm.
Talk a little bit about the control, some of the things that he did right early on that were just control. Like one thing you mentioned to me was about not letting you go to the not letting you get your medicine.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
When you were sick.
And this was after being married. I had gotten, and we had moved away at this point. We had moved to North Carolina for his new job in the military.
Uh-huh.
And I honestly felt like a prisoner in our apartment. I didn't feel like I could go anywhere. I couldn't do anything. I couldn't even go to the grocery store without being screamed at. Well, why did you go there instead of here? And I remember, like you said, referring back to the medicine incident, I was so sick over Christmas. I had a bunch of head nasal stuff going on. It was getting down into my chest, and my brother is a physician, and he told me, go and get some Mucinex. That will clear it up because it dries you all up. Well, it was too expensive, so he didn't want to buy it. So he made me wait I think 3 days until he could go onto his base and get medicine. So I had to wait 3 days, and in the meantime, I had to have my mother send me a huge package down filled with medicine, tissues, cough drops, everything that you could think of that I would possibly need for a head cold. And she sent all that down to me.
Okay.
So,
Like the Lord for our parents.
True.
They help us sometimes, don't they? Okay, what about the car incident with the parents?
So this was shortly after we had gotten married, and some sort of argument arose that he got mad at me over. I think it was I hadn't learned to cook yet.
Okay.
And this was something that I was going to learn while he was off at boot camp. Well, I hadn't learned already, so he was mad. And he called me some very not so nice names, pretty much about the worst in the book that you could think of. I'm not going to say those words. But, and he told me that he wished I was a boy so he could punch all the teeth down the back of my throat. And
Okay.
that was the first time that he had used those words with me, but throughout the marriage those words carried.
Okay. And his parents heard that?
They did, and they just sat and didn't say or do anything.
And they did nothing?
They did absolutely nothing.
Goodness.
So I think a lot of this has stemmed from him not being disciplined, not
Maybe.
being told no. But I think there comes a certain point in your life where you're a man, you're a grown man, or at least he thought he was, and you need to have control of your words and you need to have control of your actions.
Right. You said that he said the devil overcame him.
Yeah, he told me that one time. We were just sitting and talking, and I think I had brought up something about him not just being mean. I'd finally just confronted him, and he said he didn't know why he treated me and some other people the way that he did. It was like the devil overcame him.
I bet that was scary.
That was kind of a scary statement.
Uh-huh.
I didn't really know what to, I don't think I said anything. I didn't know what to think of that.
Yeah.
I didn't know how to internalize that
Goodness
statement.
gracious.
I would definitely say even throughout the marriage and through dating, he was very concentrated on, and almost like an obsession with cars, video games, and working out. Those were the 3 things that he was focused in on, and anything else was irrelevant.
Okay. You said also that you thought he had changed after boot camp.
Yeah, there was a short period of time when he had gotten back from boot camp, probably about a week's time frame, where he was just pretty low-key, decently well-mannered. I thought, wow, maybe this is my answered prayer. Like, he seems so much better.
Right.
So, but it was very short-lived. And I also want to add to the gut instinct part that about 2 weeks after we had gotten married, I was laying in bed and he had been screaming at me for some time because I was upset because I couldn't see my family. And I finally picked up the phone and I texted someone that I loved, and I just told them, I said, I just feel deep in my heart this is not going to work out. And I love my family and I love being around my family, and it wasn't in any sort of way that I couldn't be away from them.
Right.
But that was my safety net. I knew that I was going to be treated well and I was going to be loved when I was with them.
Right.
Versus when I was with this person and who this person surrounded themselves with and this person's family.
Yeah.
I didn't feel protected. I didn't feel safe. I was in constant
Well,
fear.
and you weren't safe and you weren't protected. So, I mean, it's no wonder you didn't feel that way. You wrote on here something that's really interesting, I thought. You said he owned me. Did he say that, or is that the way you felt?
That's the way that I felt. A lot of times he would say, well, we're married now, so da-da-da-da-da. And I felt like that was his way of pretty much saying, like, I own you. But I felt like he owned me too.
Okay. All right. Now, this is really serious. You said he threatened to kill you
Mm-hmm.
on more than one occasion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he threatened to put a bullet through my skull, like if I ever tried to leave him or divorce him. And there were some other situations which, for legal reasons, I can't really get into details about, but hopefully at a later date I can explain some of this more.
Okay. All right. Do you want to talk about the guns, or is that something we need to not talk about?
We can touch on it. It was something that constantly scared me day in and day out. He was about as reckless with his guns as he is with his cars. And there were a couple occasions where the firearm was pointed at himself, at me, just in a joking sort of manner. But
You don't joke with firearms.
Joke with a firearm.
No.
Mm-mm.
Now, you said he threatened to kill you, but didn't he also threaten to harm himself?
Mm-hmm. There was a time where I attempted to leave one time, and I had left him a note and just said that I needed to go clear my head, get my thoughts straight, because I was living in fear day in and day out, and I was scared if I stayed, he was going to end up really hurting me or doing something very, very bad. So when I ended up leaving, he ended up catching me because he got off of work early. Well, we ended up coming upstairs, and he was very, very livid and enraged, and that enragement ended up leading to him just crying and saying, if you want to leave, just leave. And he said, but if you do, I'll either go overseas and serve in war, and then he led into that he couldn't live without me, so he'd just kill himself.
Goodness. Okay. Tell me about the incident where he grabbed your leg.
Mm-hmm. So one day in the apartment, he had grabbed onto my leg, and it was hurting me. So I told him to stop. He didn't stop. He kept on, and I finally just told him, I said, stop, you are hurting me, let me go. And he didn't, and he ended up telling me to shut up in his verbiage. He used different terms than that, and then he decided to squeeze down even harder to the point where I couldn't even hardly stand it, and I was able to get away and go into the bathroom and just lock the door and just sit there because I was scared. Because it's like he knew he was hurting me, and he decided just to hurt me even more. But he decided to hurt me more because I think he thought it was going to hush me, because he said he was worried about neighbors hearing, because someone might report him on base.
Okay, so he wasn't worried about your leg. He was worried that someone might hear you cry out in pain. Okay.
And there was a couple incidences where he would punch me in the hip and just think it was funny.
Yeah.
Just for play.
I was going there next. So
yeah, and not just a little hey, no, full out punch to the point where I couldn't even walk. And I think a lot of times someone's abusers will do this. A hip you can hide, a face you can't.
Right.
To the public.
Exactly.
And maybe, initially, years ago, I would have thought of abuse as someone, punching your face, just awful, but...
Well, abuse comes in all forms.
It does.
It comes in emotional form, psychological form, financial, sexual, physical, any type of, any of those things that are being done to you, those are abuses as well.
Mm-hmm.
And it sounds like that you pretty much had the spectrum of abuse done to you, Amy
Mm-hmm.
Beth. One thing that you said on here too about, we've already talked about you not being allowed to eat certain foods, but that he tracked the mileage on your car.
Mm-hmm. To see if I had gone anywhere.
Okay. All right, and this is something that is common. From ladies I've talked to who have went through this, and that he completely isolated you. We talked about your family, cutting you off from your family,
Mm-hmm.
and your friends as well.
Mm-hmm. I think he chose this profession because he knew he could get me miles and miles away from my family and my friends and everyone that I love, and that's what he wanted.
Yeah.
I also wanted to add to the physical aspect of it, because I feel like this is just so degrading, is he tried to shove my head in a toilet one time. And, my stomach I suffered from extreme, I don't know if you want to call it like gastrointestinal issues while I was down there, but it was not good.
Well, it's no wonder.
Mm-hmm. And so he thought it would be funny to try to shove my head down in it.
Goodness gracious. Okay, so let's talk about your leaving.
Okay.
Is there anything else you want to say about that before we go on to when you left?
Well, I think one of the final, and this wasn't necessarily why I left, but it was just like a build up, like it kept on building up, because he said like he'd get better, and then it never got better. Like it might get better for a couple days, but then it would go right back to it, right back to his ways. And so I remember I accidentally washed his ID card badge.
Mm-hmm.
And so he couldn't find it, and he went into the clean laundry in the laundry room, and he was feeling around his uniform, and I saw him go like this, and he like latched onto it, and I was like, oh no. I was like, I am literally about to get it from him. And he like looked over at me and like opened it up and like looked at it, and then just like looked at me with like this most evil look on his face, and he chucked it behind the washer and dryer and started screaming GD, and how I was so incompetent, and that pretty much did it for me.
So that was the last straw.
Mm-hmm.
I know that probably seems like a small straw,
Mm-hmm.
but with all the abuse that you suffered at his hands, that was kind of the very last thing, but it was enough to get you to get you to thinking, how am I going to get away from him,
Mm-hmm.
right?
It was.
So you said you packed your bags while he was at work, and
Yes, and I had a family member help me do that, and it was probably the hardest decision that I've ever had to make. It was a real struggle deciding just to finally do that. So it was hard.
and you did go to counseling.
Yes, I did go to counseling when I got back home, and that has made a world of difference.
And you were still trying at this point to save your marriage. You went to counseling
Mm-hmm.
hoping that would save your marriage and hoping he would go.
Yes, and I tried to get him to go to counseling. There was always some excuse for it. And one of the reasons that I left too was not only for fear for my safety and for my life, but he wouldn't allow me to go to counseling down there because he said that the counselor would say that I was the crazy one. And I wasn't allowed to go to counseling either because it would be put on military insurance, and he was afraid that some of the things that he had done would be reported back to his work. So I knew if I came home through my father's work that I would be granted, so many sessions of counseling.
Okay.
And my counselor has really helped me through a lot. She's been able to really help me see things in a different light. So.
Okay. All right.
And made me realize I'm not crazy.
That's right. It's that's right.
Because it was hard. It was hard coming back because I blamed myself for probably even a couple months after I'd officially filed for divorce. I really did think that it was me for so long.
That's the after effects of that crazy making behavior.
It is.
His family, of course, they're taking his side with this. Your counselor, you said your counselor told you to run, that you were not cut from the same cloth.
And that was something that I struggled with for a very long time, was how could someone and their family, even some of their friends, how could they think that this behavior is okay? How could they think this behavior is acceptable? I mean, it's awful.
Yeah.
And, keep on living life and thinking it's all right.
Yeah, to treat someone
I
else
would
like
never,
this.
I would never be able to do some of the things that they did and he did and be okay with myself at the end of the day. I'd feel awful.
Yeah.
And maybe that's part of his problem.
Maybe. We'll let's just go ahead and talk about right now the fruits of the Spirit. One of the fruits of the Spirit is self-control. And, we were talking about that, before. And if a person doesn't have any type of self-control, you have to wonder how much is the Holy Spirit actually leading that person.
I agree.
You just have to wonder about that. You filed for divorce in July and you cut off your communication.
You pretty much have to cut off all communication.
Smart idea.
If not, you have a little birdie in your back ear telling you that you're still at fault when that's not the case at all.
Yeah.
And I also wanted to add that I did come back home in January before I had officially left him, and I talked to my priest for about 4 hours over everything, and you could just see the concern and the worry on his face. But a priest, they're not.
Well, they're a priest.
Yeah, they're not.
They're wanting everybody. They love everybody.
Yeah,
and like we're supposed to.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So he just said at the end of our conversation, just let, trust your gut, and, since I'm Catholic, let Mother Mary lead you.
Yeah.
And I didn't know for so long what that meant until I finally did decide to come home. And when I saw him afterwards, he cupped my little face and he just said, I just want you to know that I prayed every single day that you would make the decision that you did to come home. So, and I knew at that moment that I'd made the right decision and I was on the right track.
Yeah. It takes two people, Mary Beth, to make a marriage work. And it can't just be one that wants the marriage to work. You were the one that wanted it to work because you were willing to go to counseling and do whatever you had to do.
Even
after all
everything.
that. And he was not willing to make any type of change in his life to do that. So
No.
You also found out that he had an affair.
I did. I'm not really sure how long that had been going on for. I don't know if it had been going on before I had officially left or if it started afterwards. This person apparently ended up having some sort of relation at boot camp because this woman she was up at boot camp the same time my husband was, and I found out she had had a relation with someone. I don't know who. I really don't care to know at this point.
At this point.
And that was hurtful to find out, but that's something that they're going to have to take up with God one day, and that's in their ball court.
Right.
So
But you are divorced. Your divorce
Yes.
divorce is final,
Mm-hmm.
and the litigation is still going
Mhm.
on. Do you want to talk about that victims thing that you were?
Yeah, so I had to fill out a victims questionnaire for a lawyer, and it was very interesting to me because every single question that they asked on that questionnaire, I was checking yes to, this happened to me. And then I would have to explain myself. And at the end of it, I was just like looking at it and I was like, oh my word, it's like this was made for him. So
there's a. It would
It's a-
seem like there's a pattern
yes.
of behavior that the people who abuse
Mm-hmm.
that they do.
Mm-hmm.
So let's kind of go to a positive note.
Okay.
Let's talk about your life changes, Amy Beth. You have had a lot of things that you've accomplished
have.
in the last 6 or 8 months. You got new furniture and a dog
I did. I got a new
and a
little
tattoo.
puppy. Yes, I did. To kind of, it's not really a representation of this part of my life. I think it's just a representation as a whole. But that finally just led me to go do it. I just said, I want this. And it says, with pain comes strength. So I think it's very empowering, and I think it can apply to a lot of places.
Every
in
time you
life.
look at that tattoo, you'll think about what you came through and how God brought you through that.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
You sold and gave away everything associated with him
Correct.
because you didn't want that reminder.
Mm-mm.
You started a new job, went back to school,
I did.
and you did something else really important that's really necessary if you're going through an abusive situation. You surrounded yourself with people
Mm-hmm.
who are supportive and positive.
Mm-hmm. I did.
So,
Very uplifting people. I have a good family and I have good friends, so I'm very blessed.
yes.
And yeah, so I'm going back to school now for criminal justice. So it's something I think I've always kind of had a little bit of a passion for it, just having seen my dad in it.
Yeah.
And then, seeing stuff on TV, it's always elaborated. But
Yeah.
I think this has really been, because before I really didn't know what I wanted to do with life. I was in so many different directions, and I think all of this happened for a lot of different reasons, but I think this was one of them to direct me into this career path.
Sometimes, sometimes a painful situation or something can really be the thing that drives you forward into your calling. Unfortunately, it sometimes comes around about with that, but what advice would you give to folks that are in this situation?
Okay, so I wrote a couple things down here. So
You just go right ahead, girl.
Okay, so I know for me personally, sharing my story has helped me tremendously. So I think being able to do that and share, other people being able to get out there and share their story and in some way is empowering, and it just knowing that it might help someone else
Yes.
helps. And just knowing that other people are out there that are going through the same thing you're going through or have gone through the same thing you're going through. Let's see. So if he doesn't have a relationship with God, he won't know how to have one with you.
Boy, that's the truth. That is absolutely the truth, because you have to love God first.
Mm-hmm. I agree. And if he doesn't know God, he doesn't know real love.
That's true.
And I'm not trying to be a doctor here or anything like that, but I know in my situation, something I forgot to touch on, which kind of goes with this, is mine had a lot of narcissistic tendencies. And it's like everything that I read, everything that I've told my counselor, everything just lines up. It's like, wow, he did that, or wow, it's just, it's shocking seeing it in words from someone else or from a doctor, and then knowing that's what happened to me, that's what they do.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's kind of eye-opening.
Yeah. So you said they should give you freedom, not captivity.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was real powerful.
Yes.
Because you mentioned you felt like you were owned,
Mm-hmm.
and now you're free.
I am.
You're out of that cage.
It's a good feeling.
Yes, it is. Don't hide your scars. They are proof that God heals.
Mm-hmm.
What a powerful statement that is.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Anything else that you would like to add? I know you probably have another thing or two that you would like to say, and I know you have do you have the poem that you want to read?
Oh yeah. I had a quote I was gonna say at the end. Just don't be with someone who makes you feel like worthless and useless and makes you feel ugly and
If you're feeling uneasy around a person,
mm-hmm.
I'm going to say this to the audience, to who's there is a reason.
Mm-hmm.
Don't go back for seconds. Don't go back. Don't second guess yourself. If the Holy Spirit inside you is telling you to get away from that person, there's a reason why.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one thing I would just add there. Just pay attention to the Holy Spirit.
I agree.
So
and I think overlooking, I know for me, luckily me being able to tell this to people, I haven't really had anyone that's questioned if I'm being truthful.
Yeah.
But I would say cut yourself off from any sort of enablers that person has,
Yeah.
any sort of contacts that person has.
Yeah.
Just cut it completely off because it's just going to end up hurting you worse.
Yes.
At the end of the day, you know the truth. God knows the truth, and that's all that matters.
Right.
So anyone from the other side who might doubt you or who just doesn't want to believe you, just cut them off.
I know I heard someone say once, and this is really true, if you're wrong, you don't have a defense, and if you're right, you don't need a defense.
It's so true.
So that is absolutely the truth.
I've heard that too. It's like if the truth is like a lion. If you set it free, it doesn't need defense. It'll defend itself.
Yeah, that's true. Well, just tell us your quote. I love this
Okay.
quote.
Let's see. So the quote is, and I think this is a good one. So it says, "I spent so many years walking on eggshells, never doing or saying the right thing. One day I decided I'd had enough and stomped all over them. Those broken eggshells cut me deeply as I walked away, but this was the most beautiful pain I had ever felt." It gets me every time.
I know.
It's so true.
Well, it is. And when we talked the last time, you told me a couple of things. You said, truth sounds like hate to those who hate the truth.
Mm-hmm.
And there is no virtue in tolerating toxic behavior.
Mm-mm.
And I know everybody wants their relationships to work out. They want everything to, be okay, and they are hoping for your marriage. But if the other person isn't willing to go to counseling and to do those things, then you can work on yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And that's all you can do at that point, and
That's
pray.
true.
So I think this is a good place to end, unless you have anything else you'd like to say, Amy Beth, do you?
The only thing I would say is if you're going through it, life does get better. I know for me personally, there will always be internal scars there, but through counseling and through God and through your family and just through working on yourself, it does get better. Like, it'll always be there, but it doesn't have to rule and consume your life.
It's true. That's absolutely true. And I'm going to leave a link in the description to some mental health places where you can call, some abuse hotlines that you can call, places you can get in touch with if you have any type of these issues going on in your life. If you just need someone to talk to, just know that there are ways to get out of your situation. There are agencies and there are people who are there to help you if you need any help at all. And I'd like to thank Amy Beth for coming and for the bravery to come out and just tell her story. This is Elaine, the Ninja Life Coach. God bless. Maranatha.